Through April and May, you were catching channel catfish steadily from the same bank. Then early summer arrived, and the bite seemed to shut off almost overnight. Same water, same bait, same evening routine, but the rod stayed still. Many anglers assume the fish moved far away or stopped feeding completely. In reality, part of the population has shifted into spawning behavior, while the fish that are still available often use different cover, different timing, and different travel lanes than they did in spring. The fish did not simply vanish. The pattern changed. Here is the seasonal change behind it. Channel catfish commonly begin spawning as water warms into roughly the mid-70s Fahrenheit. Although timing varies by region, water body, and the stability of the warming trend. A mature male selects a dark, protected cavity beneath a bank, root mass, log, rock gap, or submerged debris. After spawning, the male remains close to the nest and guards the eggs and newly hatched young. That behavior removes some of the largest, most catchable fish from the normal open water feeding pattern, which is why a bank that produced all spring can suddenly feel empty. A useful cavity is not just any depression in the shoreline. It is enclosed, dark, fully submerged, and protected from direct current. It usually has one main entrance and enough room for a fish to hold inside without being exposed from every direction. Undercut banks, hollow root systems, gaps beneath fallen timber, spaces between large rocks, and pockets inside submerged debris can all create this type of cover. A shallow scrape open on three sides is not the same thing. The key is protection, not merely a hole-shaped shadow. This distinction matters because anglers often mistake every dark bank edge for occupied spawning habitat. These cavities form in predictable places, but not in only one type of bank. Outside bends are worth inspecting because current can undercut the bank, but protected cavities also form beneath shoreline trees, submerged logs, rock edges, old root balls, and debris lodged against the bank. A steep, clean-looking bank may hide a shelf beneath the surface. A tree leaning over the water may have a hollow root system below it. The best clue is not what the top of the bank looks like. It is whether moving water, decaying roots, or lodged structure had enough time to create a protected space underneath. Temperature explains why this change feels sudden. Below the spawning window, many channel catfish remain in a more familiar feeding pattern, moving between cover, current, and open water food sources. As the water settles into the spawning range, mature males begin committing to protected cavities, and the spring pattern weakens. This does not happen on the same day in every pond, creek, or reservoir, and it does not move every fish at once. Treat the temperature as a seasonal clue, not a switch. A stable warming trend matters more than a single reading taken on one afternoon, and local conditions can stretch the spawning period across several weeks. But the most important correction is this. The answer is not to force a bait into an active nest and try to make a guarding fish react. A nest-guarding male may feed very little, can be difficult to catch, and removing him can leave eggs or young vulnerable. The better question is where the remaining active fish are feeding while part of the population is tied to spawning cover. That shift turns the video from nest targeting into a practical early summer search pattern. The bank still matters, but the target moves from the hole itself to the first usable water around it. Not every channel catfish in the water is inside a cavity. Females typically leave after spawning, younger fish may not be involved at all, and other adults continue to use nearby feeding routes. Start by checking the first travel water outside the spawning bank, the edge of the deeper channel, the downstream side of root cover, the first current break beyond the undercut, or the nearest soft bottom flat that receives drifting food after dark. These fish are often close to the spawning habitat without sitting inside the nest itself. Think near the bank, not inside the bank, and look for the first place a moving fish can rest, feed, or turn before returning to cover. Reading the bank still matters, but now it tells you where to search around the cavities rather than where to place a bait into them. Look for undercut sections, root hollows, timber gaps, and rock pockets. Then map the water immediately outside those features. Where does the bottom first deepen? Where does current slow? Is there a narrow lane between the cavity bank and open water? Does a shallow flat begin 20 feet downstream? Does the bank create a shaded edge that remains cooler into the afternoon? Those are the places non-guarding fish can travel and feed, while the spawning bank remains the center of the seasonal pattern. Time of day becomes more important once the spring bite fades. In many waters, the open daytime bite weakens as warm conditions push active catfish toward dusk, night, and the first hours before sunrise. That means a bank that seems empty at 6 in the afternoon may become productive after dark, especially along the short route between cavity cover and a nearby feeding flat. Instead of abandoning the whole area, return when light drops and place your bait on the first travel lane outside the protected bank. The fish may not have moved far. They may simply be using the same water on a different schedule. Presentation should match those nearby feeding lanes. Instead of pinning a bait against the cavity entrance, place it just outside the protected cover, along the first edge where a moving fish can find it without entering open water. In current, cast slightly upstream and let the bait settle into the slack seam beside the bank. In still ponds, work the first drop, root edge, or soft bottom lane adjacent to the cavity zone. Use enough weight to hold position, but not so much that the bait sits unnaturally rigid. Give each nearby lane time before moving, because early summer catfish may feed in shorter windows and more concentrated routes than they did in spring. There is also a responsibility line here. If a cavity appears to be an active nest, do not repeatedly probe the entrance, drag a bait into the hole, or treat the guarding fish as the target. Move a short distance away and fish the surrounding travel water instead. The goal is to understand why the open water bite changed, not to remove a fish that is protecting eggs or young. This also keeps the method practical in places where reaching into holes, noodling, or disturbing nests is unsafe, illegal, or restricted. The useful lesson is seasonal diagnosis, not nest exploitation. Not every early summer slowdown is caused by spawning, so rule out the other common shifts before blaming the bank cavities. Heavy rain can raise and muddy a creek, moving fish away from familiar edges. Forage can shift toward new current, flooded grass, or wind-blown banks. A sudden cold front may interrupt a warming pattern and delay spawning activity. The cavity pattern is most likely when the water has been warming steadily. The spring bite falls off quickly, protected habitat is present, and nearby travel lanes still show signs of life. If those pieces do not line up, keep diagnosing instead of forcing the explanation. Here is the field sequence on a new bank. First, check the warming trend rather than relying on one temperature reading. Second, identify protected cavity habitat without disturbing it. Third, mark the nearest feeding water, a current seam, channel edge, soft bottom flat, root line, or after dark travel lane. Fourth, fish that surrounding water from the outside in, beginning far enough away that you are not repeatedly contacting the nest area. Fifth, change the clock before changing the whole location. A quiet afternoon bank may become active after sunset. This sequence keeps the useful parts of the spawning pattern while avoiding the mistake of turning the cavity itself into the target. The field checklist is simple. When the spring catfish bite suddenly fades, confirm a stable warming trend and look for undercut banks, root hollows, log gaps, rock pockets, and submerged debris. Use those features to locate the surrounding travel water, not to target an active nest. Check the nearest channel edge, current break, soft bottom lane, and nighttime feeding route. Rule out muddy rising water, a cold interruption, a forage move, and a shift to after-dark feeding. If a cavity appears active, leave it alone and move a short distance outward. Has your early summer catfish bite ever disappeared from a bank that had produced all spring? Subscribe to Traditional Angling, and next we follow these fish into their full summer feeding pattern.